I call this June 18th, 2025 Finance and Resource Committee meeting to order. The time is 10:03 a.m. I'll call roll. Yeah, Liz, Jason here. Okay, moving on to approve the minutes from May 21st, 2025. I move to approve the minutes from the May 21st, 2025 Finance and Resource Committee meeting.
I second.
And roll.
Yep. I
Yes,
vote yes.
and yes. Moving on, public comment. No one in the room for public comment, so we'll close public comment. And now moving on to item 3A, 2024 referendum update.
Sure, I'll do that. Good morning, everybody. I don't know if we can bring up we should all be attachments.
I got them all right there.
May 2025 project update. So like all the other updates, the format's the same, highlighting some phase one work for Madison. By recall, phase one and phase two are broken off by phase one work being work that we could expedite over the next several months that would require state review and is planned for the fall of this year. Phase two work would be all the remaining work, which is majority of the 60 million that would occur in the summer of 26 and 27. So we're focusing on design and estimating their schematic design and schematic estimating. We're in the process now of currently and today where I just came from going through schematic design budget phase right now, where we throw rough order of magnitude costs to the scope of work we determined in the schematic design phase. And then we'll look at those budgets that are estimates and work towards making sure we're aligning to the budget established for each building.
You shared those with me. Could you give an example of like, I didn't totally understand it until I saw like the line item. So we originally had the line item and then sort of gave a rough description of what it was. And then can you just tell a little bit about what that step looks like that you're working through now?
Of course. So I may have communicated back when we first began the referendum concept that what we have here that was communicated to the public was a list of what's wrong in each building. Typically, you would take that list and combine projects. You can get some scope efficiencies that way and so on. So part of our struggle right now is as Scott said, we're going line item by line item in each building, doing that schematic design phase to combine the projects, look for efficiencies, and also look for, do we still need this to occur? And what else could we get done in that building that maybe wasn't identified in the assessment that will help be in the best interest of the kids and the staff in that building? An example, I think, was at Eisenhower, working on some of the office renovations for ADA restrooms. When the assessment was done and the list of what was wrong at Eisenhower was developed, the trailer sitting outside for the additional staff wasn't there. So we're looking for an opportunity right now to address underutilized space because of the age of the building and correct that problem for staff and remove the trailer. Now on the list, that'll be added in scope. But in our presentation to the board of our final schematic design budgeting, those are some questions we're going to pose to the board. Is that okay? Or do we simply stick to the list of what's wrong and don't look for opportunities to correct other issues? Did I explain that in the manner you were looking for too?
I understood better than was
Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, I think that's it. There might be more questions too.
I think that makes sense to bring up to the regular board meeting to say, ask whether or not should spend a little bit of time actually upfront looking for efficiencies that will save greater costs down the road would be my
Correct.
assumption.
You know, I don't think it's we could be told to live by the letter of the list. But I don't think anybody would, I think everybody would agree, look for opportunities to make the building the best you can make it
Mhm.
now.
Yeah. Is it everything so far on schedule as far as your initial anticipated timeframe? Like,
For the phase 1 and phase 2 work,
yeah, just as far as
the
in general.
planning work is on schedule.
Okay, so
Uh,
no major hiccups or anything that have happened since we started.
what do you mean by, what would you characterize as major hiccup?
I don't know, I'm assuming you have rough, like a rough Gantt chart or something similar of how things are going and more or less just a question of is everything going as expected?
I expected this process to be difficult because of the list approach instead of a project approach. So we added another layer in that work that you normally have done ahead of time. So I expected we'd be at a difficult point currently where we are right now. And the reason for that is looking for the efficiencies to correct other problems in the building is causing some budgets to track over budget. From a schematic design perspective, nothing's been bid out, it's more of a schematic planning. And that's part of a process that you do. Then you understand the current conditions of where you are with that design. And then now the team will work on pulling back on that design to get back down to budget.
Okay,
I kind of, now that I thought about it, I kind of liken it to when we finished our basement years ago. And we were, the plumber was there and the discussion was, do you want to plumb for a bathroom someday or not, right? And ideally, yeah, we would have liked to have, that plan for a bathroom, but we didn't have the few $1,000s to be, so ultimately we chose, well, I guess we'll choose to forego a bathroom. I don't know if that was the right choice or wrong choice, but it was important the plumber bring it up because that was the cheapest time to do it. I'd rather make the choice then than at a later point, and I think that's kind of what we're dealing with.
We are very much so, yeah. So we're gonna present those options to you.
okay,
To make sure that everyone understands we're accomplishing everything on the list. Maybe not verbatim, because we're combining things and dropping off certain scope because it's not necessary. But the spirit of the list will be achieved.
okay. And just in general, are you feeling like, where are you feeling as far as bad, good, great? Just as far as the process is, right?
I think our process is really good. I think our team is good. I think your dedication from both PRA and VJS to get this down to budget and make sure we deliver on everything that was expected.
Yeah, sounds good. No other questions for me,
Thank you.
Liz?
I just have one. So on the summary, it says cost estimates for phase 1. I'm assuming the schematic planning that you're talking about is primarily towards phase 2, or is that towards phase 1 or both?
Yeah, phase 1, the turnaround was so fast that in fact, those bids have been going out, they'll go out soon. That we didn't really do a full schematic design.
That's okay. That's what I assumed based on
We didn't
time.
have much time.
Yeah.
Because our goal was to get things as much as we could done as early as we can, focus on some safety and a lot of exterior work.
Okay, and then it says that cost estimates for phase 1 have now been finalized. Have those, I know it hasn't gone to bid, and these are just estimates. Is that within the budget that you expected for phase 1?
I don't have that answer right now, but I can get it.
Maybe for the board meeting on Monday?
Let me see what I come up with. Yeah, I'll try. I don't know if we have enough, I don't know if that statement together by VGS is entirely,
Okay.
including everything that you would think be in there.
Yeah, I
So
think,
there's some incomplete information.
I think whatever you feel comfortable with the accuracy of it, I'd rather it
Yeah, sure.
be accurate and than just rush to get something out there.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Any other questions, I guess, first? Okay, moving on to 3B, immediate capital needs. Oh, I think I've got some content to say here. We have some immediate capital needs in an art room at East High School. This is for discussion and proposed action at the next board meeting.
So, Tim, if you don't mind.
Is it the bottom?
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So what we had talked about at a prior committee meeting is you don't have a budget for emergency. And what I wanted to do is make the committee and board aware each time we have an emergency. So that should the year end with a fund balance contribution different than what we had budgeted, we're able to track it back to each of these projects that we had to do. And this is the first of those that has come up. So maybe Kevin, do you want to give a brief?
Yeah, this is this
I'm
document.
sorry, I'll say one more
Go
thing.
ahead, yeah, please.
In the nicest way I can. I'm not sure why these types of projects weren't completed a decade ago. So to some extent, we are dealing with things that we knew, or someone knew, many years ago. And some of them have just reached the point now where there is no other option. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
This is an audit conducted by ENC, our environmental consulting firm. Just had a relationship with them for many years, I think, and a lot of work done in 2018 referendum. These are the experts we call on when we have indoor environmental quality complaint, indoor air or asbestos or lead paint issues. There was a complaint in the art room 123 at East. There are, I think back in December of 24, it might have been, I'm losing, I think about a year and a half ago. The teacher there was complaining about things. We recognized our department, there were some things awry in that room. This assessment you see here is a follow-up to the original safety audit done back then. And more or less talked about how we corrected a lot of the issues that are related to what you refer to as OSHA violations. All of the school district, we follow state department guidelines. In particular, in this room and in room 119 and art room 2 rooms down, both rooms have asbestos containing floor tiles. And there might be a photo of floor tiles somewhere on that document.
There is.
Yeah,
Just. We'll find it somewhere, Tim.
right there.
Loose floor tile.
Yeah, so it's very common in a lot of the district's older buildings that there's a tremendous amount of what we call asbestos ACT floor tile in our buildings. And very often, because of the age, they do pop up, usually in one piece. When you look at the composition of this asbestos containing material, imagine that 3% of that contains an asbestos fiber. The remaining percentage is non-hazardous to your health. But 3% does trigger that you treated in a certain way. Left alone,
Is 3% the threshold?
Yeah.
Is.
it was below 3%.
Perfect.
It might be below 3% or maybe 2, I forget the number.
It was
But we hit the threshold, and it's very common that most ACT is set up that way. Now, we treat this differently than we would friable asbestos insulation, which can turn into a dust. That's a much more serious thing when you try and manage it. In the case of this, regulations allow us to have a maintenance person just simply go remove that tile and replace the tile with an updated floor tile. So it's very common for district practices to just, that you cannot afford to remove all these asbestos tile in all the buildings at one time. You manage it And EMC helps us with that as well. And we inventory all our ECP and ACBM. The point to this discussion here is that the level of the amount of tile that are beginning to fail and come up is overwhelming, especially in room 123. And we feel, given the attention that 123 has had a focus on lately, you may have heard, Scott and I are recommending that we address this issue, and it really is kind of like putting out a fire. It should have been done years ago, but this is what we face currently. Did I summarize that?
Yeah. Well, and then you're gonna talk about the link too.
Yeah, I don't know if you see, if you go back up, Tim. Keep going. Maybe it's at the bottom of the document. Right there. Those are electric kilns, and then there's a original few put in there. Point of that is to get the heat and any off-gassing from the ceramic product that's being cooked to get that out of the building. According to current standards, the wood is not adequate in flow. And there's also some side curtains recommended, probably more to kind of be a barrier for not touching interference. That's very common in a lot of schools to have that issue. So we would want to bring a mechanical contractor in and verify the exhaust fluid's performance and take corrective action.
So it comes from a timing standpoint, what? The difficulty we're having, or that I know we're going to have throughout the year or until we find a secondary solution is, unlike our capital projects list, where the committee approves it, the board approves it, and Kevin has a runway to get things done with a kind of typical discussion, action process. These types of things, if we want this done, say before the beginning of the school year, the runway Kevin has doesn't really allow for discussion today, discussion at the next board meeting, for action at the following board meeting after that. And so we're some between a rock and a hard place because we don't know what the board would like Kevin to do.
So some more background, going off what Scott said, I do have some conceptual pricing. We have it dated, and they have new flooring put in that mimics our local cities. We're probably tracking around $70,000 conceptually.
That's for the asbestos, for the tiles on.
Remove the tile, and then you also remove the master. And to put new flooring in, tracking about 70,000. Conceptually right now. If I were given permission, that would need to begin having EMC develop the abatements, get that planned, work with a flooring contractor. This week or next week, in order to make sure we get this done over the summer. And the work for the kilns, that could kind of happen in time. It's not starters sometimes too, but with the kilns, we're probably going to track closer to 100 grand, especially as the report recommends. Recommends that we look at West High School as well. The verify that those kilns are the ventilation will do those kilns as well.
$100,000 just for the kiln at East and West, or in addition to the tiles.
And so if you look at just the flooring replacement, abatement and replacement, 2 meetings, updating ventilation for the kilns at East and at West. I'm anticipating we're going to track close to 100,000. And those are just what order related to several funds. So I think some more background, but we'll give it a check for the CIP budget.
I don't know if Tim has a second that.
I just have what is policy with Dr. Means on, so
Policy allows, we had to invoke this last year, that the superintendent can.
for like an emergency, I
Correct.
think that was with like the
Most of me.
staff at one of our elementary
At
schools.
Washington.
Is it in
Yeah.
that?
So with it, how vague, I can't find the policy, how vague is that policy? And is this something that would fit within that policy? And if not, what is the total amount that it has to go to a board vote? What's the total amount spent?
So it wouldn't fit within the policy,
Okay,
because this is a structural
Okay.
emergency issue. So I don't think it's really as much of a policy question as. I don't think we're comfortable invoking. It's one thing to invoke the policy, there's a flood, we have to open Monday.
Yeah.
Right, I think this also fits, but at the same time, we have enough awareness that we can at least make the committee and board aware. And that's kind of the balance we're trying to find.
From a cost standpoint and funding, this is an updated copy of previously approved, 2024 to 2026 capital budget. I'll just page through very quickly, but, the first two pages are a lot of our work at elementaries, and all those are completed. We're almost done with our security updates. We keep going, page 3. And then here we begin on page 3. You can see some of the projects that we're focusing on for 25-26 that were recommended previously. Not doing any work at elementary because we don't need to. We have some exterior doors that are critical at Whitman. At Whitman, we've got a door remodel that is needed end of life. Some parking lot replacement issues. In East, we're nearly finished on the gymnasium lighting remodel. I think the staircase floor remodel is in progress right now. And on the left column, on the 25-26 column, I have to confirm the budget yet, but we got the cooling tower repairs. We did decide at this committee, I believe, to cut tech ed remodel and alt ed. On the next page. In the current budget year, we're still, radio repairs at East are in progress, that work's underway. On the right side, we've got projects planned for West. We have a critical roof repair need at the canopy, east, entry canopy remodel, east elevation. We originally set a budget of $200,000 for that, and I revised budgeting on the far right. I'm now at 45 because I've got that bid out. Center Street improvements, we now have a better idea. We originally budgeted 400, costs that the city has gotten back for our responsibility. We're gonna set a budget of 250 based upon those costs. And then I previously talked about how we're going to, while this work is occurring over at West and at Eisenhower, we're going to address that failing staircase that comes off Center Street. And we're setting a budget of $300,000 for that. Projects that have not started, but are kind of queued out there in a planning sense, and working with BJS, is to address the one last school that has primary power. Primary power is that example where we own the transformer instead of We Energies owning it, and then to update or replace the standby power generator. A lot of that work was done at East for the referendum, and West is still the one school meeting. If we were to pursue that work, we're anticipating $1 million total for that. I'm holding a budget item for some pool recommendations from those pool assessment reports. Those could be put on hold if we chose to. And then as we scroll down to the bottom, you'll see on the security update side for the current budget year, we have about $69,000 of that scope remaining. I think we're going to come in with a portion of that $69,000 left over. I just don't know how much yet. So with that being said, we've got over 1.3 million in 24-25 completed projects. And I'm sorry, that date should say 6/17/25. What's remaining in 24-25 that we're budgeted for is 137,000. And we have over 2.2 million in 25-26 recommended. So what that leaves you with for a balance in the Fund 41 budget is $54,000. So obviously the difficulty right now is if we're recommending an emergency repair, that would have to come out of capital improvement. We're tracking close to $100,000. We don't, it's not available under the current scenario of planned projects for 25, 26. So the decision can be made to pull back, hold on all the electrical at West, so that is $1 million. But I think, if you had anything you wanted to add to that, Scott, as far as from a decision making standpoint.
No, I don't think so. Like I said, this is to keep the board aware of. You know, both the budget and Fund 41, and we don't have the safety net there that we have before, because we've been doing projects. Just, you know, want to keep everybody very concerned.
So at this time,
Use programs, the word, the other word.
this time we're at the point where you're introducing the information to us, and are you asking, are you saying that at the next board meeting that you want to bring this up and basically with a recommendation of what possibly what to remove, or so I'm hearing you don't have any flexibility, so we've got to get that number down. Right.
Well, our two, here's our two options, I guess, boils down to, we could remove projects from the capital projects list. Or we could say, pay it from Fund 10 and keep our fingers crossed that everything else goes right, and we still have $1 million to put in fund balance, but we may not. I don't think the decision of what to remove from this list would have to be done at this exact same time as saying, put it on this list. Would it, because not everything's, certain things are happening right now, so we couldn't remove them.
But let's just look at West, where a lot of that money is either conceptually being planned for or is gonna happen. I think the one thing that has to happen, the two things that have to happen are the Center Street project and the entry canopy. Those are things we're already committed to. You'll see that on the roof repair replace 0 to 5 year plan. I'm following our 0 to 5 year plan, where there's over $1 million. And in 5 to 10 years, there's 1.75 million slotted in that plan. Originally at 252 slotted, I raised that to 400 because I backed off and every model from 200 to 45. That was just, you know, there's over 2.75 million in a roofing face in us at West. So I thought, let's start on 400,000. You can choose to just cut that and we just defer that roof replacement. And just maintain it and address needs that they occur. You can choose to not do the electrical and say and hold them. And perhaps it's something that's addressed in secondary plan. I think that's something good. And then the ADA ramp, you could, we're very close to getting that. I think BGS is bidding that out right now. We could pull back on that and then just leave that staircase to the
What? I think we keep the ADA ramp, but this is just my thoughts looking at it. So depending on what the secondary ad hoc committee and board decide, is it absolutely necessary to keep that $1 million for the electrical, or is there something that if something changes in what buildings we have and what buildings we won't be utilizing, would that always be necessary? So it's a lot of $1 million for the electrical.
Will that project always be necessary?
Yes.
That's a high priority recommendation.
Let me ask that another way.
But would it be necessary in secondary school?
Correct. So say, I mean, one of the recommendations is we have,
Have
well, one of the recommendations are things that the secondary ad hoc is like going to one high school for the whole district.
Sure.
If that high school, you know, could be east, could be west, could be a new build, is that $1 million then asking the committee the smartest use of our money? That's a lot. That's a big chunk of our money, and one that maybe in whenever we're voting on the secondary plan, we might not have west as a building. So to me, that seems like easy to pull out of this plan for now, but what risk do we have of pulling it right now?
I guess the only way I could say,
Does that make sense?
yeah, the only way I can, it does.
Okay.
The only way I could characterize it is that more priority and risk
Mhm.
tolerance is, when you look at all of our larger schools, this is the last holdout of, or the old way of doing electrical, the original equipment and primary power. So electricity is what keeps our buildings open. So in keeping it aligned to other improvements in other buildings, this is the next logical priority to recognize. At least that I would recommend in doing my responsibility. But there's nothing saying that you could hold on it and wait and you might be okay. I can't predict that any kind of failure or whatever. It's merely a recommendation based upon past practice of what you improve in other buildings.
And now things like the ADA ramp, and a lot of those things you haven't gotten out for bid yet, correct? So these
The
are.
AD ramp going out the bid right now, we're not committed to it.
Okay, so I'm just looking at. Like what are the, you know, we're trying to make up, what was it, like $54,000? Something like that, you're at the bottom of the sheet.
If these projects move forward in their current budgeted form, you'd have $54,000 left in Fund 41.
After next
And
school year.
we were saying we needed roughly $100,000 for this emergency work.
Correct, but then, you know, I think to Scott's point, there's nothing there for contingency or other things that might come up.
Understood, I guess what I'm getting at is. How conservative are the estimates on. Stuff that has not been bid out?
So if we go back up, Tim, the roofing, $400,000, we would just bid out what we think is $400,000 worth of work. The standby power generator and the electrical service update, that's the one I don't know. I based those numbers on, I think, what happened at East 2 years ago. That could likely very well trend way over budget more than it was just a starting bid. Until more detailed work is done, I have the information. It was possible it could trend over budget, and we have to say we're not gonna do it,
Right.
or you find money elsewhere.
Same thing for, like you said, the ramp is going out for, well, now. The 300,000, that's a guess, right?
That's actually a more solid number
It is.
based upon, VGS put some conceptual costing to it. And, based upon that costing, we decided to set a budget of 300,000. That their bidding should bring that project in under budget.
And what is the pool assessment recommendation?
So the Rainmaker pool assessments that we did, about a year and a half ago, that preempted the closing of Longfellow. There were some recommendations to do some improvements, in the mechanical space below the pool at West. And I just held 75,000 there for that. No scope of work for estimates have been done. It was really more to identify it as a recommendation.
And are all of these things. Things that were. I guess promised or listed out as what we were gonna try to accomplish with the referendum dollars?
Yeah, the 2024 referendum?
Yeah.
No, for the high schools, all that's, none of this reflects that work. High schools were only 88.
So even if we alter a few things on here, or the board chooses to alter or postpone, defer something, we're not. We're not deviating from what the capital.
I would say you're not reneging on promise made, it's just that it was an approved project.
No, I wanna make sure that we, that we're doing what we said we're gonna do with that money and.
The referendum money, we are doing that, correct?
Okay, great.
I mean, my recommendation would be to move that $1 million from the electrical until we know. Until we have an idea on what the secondary framework is gonna look like. And that opens up a lot for emergency funds for us for next,
I mean,
school year, sorry.
it really does.
That would be my
It
recommendation.
really does factor in a lot, because that their recommendation and a pending board vote
Mhm.
could swing several, like, yeah, well over $1 million here. Because I would assume, like, if they come to the conclusion that West is no longer needed, then 75, like, there's no reason to do pool assessment
Right.
stuff, or at least probably not, again, that committee is of the utmost importance, I think, right now. Because we have so many things, depend on what direction we take, even if that direction is keep everything exactly how it is. Um. To Liz's point, I don't know if we wanna like remove them, so cause I would wanna keep seeing it there, but. Cause I don't know what the best. What I would feel most comfortable with.
Or move it to the 26-27 school year plan. And just by then we'll have a better idea of what the secondary landscape is gonna look like. Same with the roofing, like, do we wanna spend $400,000 repairing I'm assuming certain parts of the roof now? Right, so do we wanna do that if, like,
It's a reasonable.
we're gonna build a new building?
It's a reasonable question.
So to me, that's 1.4 million, even 75, which is a rough guess. To me, it makes sense to maybe move those projects for further years and see where we land, and then that opens it up and then we don't use it, and that's more sort of money in Fund 41 at the end of 2026 school year. That's just what makes sense to me, and I would be comfortable.
Yeah, for clarification, the 45 for the canter model, there is no choice on that one.
Oh, no, I meant the 400, sorry, the 400,000 for the
For the.
roof repair.
Part of 5 year plan.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but the other one, that roof is actually.
Mhm, right.
It's in a failed state.
And to me, the ADA ramp should be priority as well, because we are working, like, I know that's part of the Center Street project too, because they're gonna be working in that area. And we want our schools to be accessible. So to me, that seems like that stays, but the rest of the non-critical west.
Well, and also Eisenhower isn't going anywhere, so, but it's really also even if West were to not be there, like that ramp is still. An additional accessibility for Eisenhower.
I don't, no, I think it just goes into the west entrance,
Does
doesn't it?
it?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember the
For the
thing.
Center Street?
Yeah, doesn't that just go into the west entrance? The ADA ramp and
I
landscaping
thought it
was
was
on the
the
east side of
The man, the
the.
southwest corner and west.
It does go to, you're right, it does go directly to west.
From.
The parking lot is shared,
Right.
but someone else could walk up
Yeah.
the sidewalk.
That's what I mean,
Okay.
it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be like it was a complete,
Mhm,
it would.
so we have.
Someone coming in from that direction, with a need for the accessibility could make use of it that way.
Of this proposed ramp,
Mhm,
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
We're right now.
mhm.
I'm sure you have to go down the track.
um. And the emergent, I mean, from what you've described, at least to me, the emergency repairs sound like. We don't really have much of a choice, that like. They need, you're talking about asbestos and. Potential fire hazard. Or. It sound like,
Indoor air quality.
yeah, it sound like pretty. From a parent perspective, I would be like, yes, get that fixed as soon as possible, so. I would like to find a way to. Make everything work, but I think the only thing we can really do is to. Reduce some proposed budgets somewhere in here. And. I mean, we said a couple months ago that we weren't going to spend unless it was an absolute emergency. This does sound like an emergency. With these other things, knowing they're not tied to the referendum, seem like things that could potentially be pushed. And I hate to defer them again, because they're already there because they're deferred, right?
I think the worst case scenario. Well, maybe not, suppose there's only some worst case, but, if if Kevin takes those off the list and we say, you know, we can't do that right now, we have this other. Needs. Worst case scenario is. The electric fails. We come back to the board and committee and we say, you know, we thought we could get by another year. We can't. That's really, so I guess maybe we really first we miss a couple of days of school or something. I had to bring in a different generator. That's the risk, but. The likelihood of that is what we're kind of assessing, right? And to me, those are the projects that seem like the most reasonable ones to put on hold, given the ad hoc committee.
I think that sounds logical and reasonable to say those. Again, we don't have to get rid of that from the planning perspective. I have no idea when the ad hoc committee is going to actually have a recommendation. So.
Well, they're scheduled to yet during the 25-26 academic year. So prior to building the 26-27
Right,
budget, they're now whether the board reaches a decision on anything. It is a different time, but
Well, I've always said that high priority is at least putting $1 million into fund balance. So to me, if waiting on these projects, stuff like shows our commitment to that, because we've said that our commitment is refunding the fund balance. To me, the risk of moving forward these projects and then having to pull from that $1 million that we've set aside, to me is like one of the last case scenarios for me in terms of building.
I would agree.
So-
Because we're not even the first month of the new fiscal
we're not
year.
in this first day yet.
Yeah, well, right.
So I think it would be. I think it would. Just be better in general to. Push them out a little bit, or. Make the room within the budget as opposed to. Trying, taking, like going back on the million, adding $1 million to the general fund. If this same thing came up like near the end of next year. And we had already tucked away 900,000 or close to $1 million or whatever, I think that would be a different story. I would say. Yeah, I like it, we have the cash. And the risk reward multiplied by cash availability says go for it. But right now we've got risk reward is there, but cash availability is essentially non-existent, so. That's my thinking on it.
So process wise, Kevin, could you just bring an updated facilities plan to the board and either have it as an agenda item for the finance session or consent agenda? I don't know what you feel more, maybe probably have a discussion about it with the board. And just say that you're making adjustments to the facilities plan.
Let me check what I think of here.
Okay, sure.
That. And I have to figure out the timing, the appropriate timing, but but what we're going to. From a project standpoint. We'll fix the arbor issues. We will reduce the scope. Of this capital plan with the roofing and the electric specifically. Which will free up some money for emergencies this year. Maybe we put a line item even in there that says reserve for emergencies, something like that.
And we don't have to, as a board, we don't have to vote. Two things are not mutually exclusive. We can vote to take action on the emergency work and with the intention of saying it will be reduced from this plan. Let's figure out where we're gonna reduce it later in
Yeah,
a month or two, or
so maybe from a process standpoint, let's try this out, I'm kind of just. Thinking off the top of my head. I hadn't forgotten the superintendent's clause, but I'm glad you brought that up, because from a process standpoint. We could move forward with our, make the board aware, if we just. As part of the superintendent's report or as part of the committee report, that we're moving forward with that emergency project. That, at the next board meeting. Kevin will be bringing for approval an updated capital projects plan. For the board to approve. That includes the funding of that emergency project. Is that?
That's what I was saying,
And
that's why,
shows, and shows what's been deferred.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
so
That
much
would be my
like,
suggestion.
much like, Tim, if you can go back up to, or go down the east, I think it is. The other way. Yeah, we did, they're much the same matter with tech ed and all that was,
Right.
but I think for the very same reasons, because he didn't know what was gonna happen at high schools. So may I recommend that I just cross those out and just, and put in zero and I can explain that at the,
Yeah, and I don't think we approved, the board, full board didn't approve that, you just gave us an update on that.
well, the one.
The cross out that east.
I don't think there was an approval, there was a date back in January, the latest version shown. I don't know, but I
I
would
know we
like
are
to see.
made aware, but do we have to vote? This is my question.
You should vote. Yeah,
Yeah, I think.
Do vote,
I
okay,
think we voted, if
Okay.
I remember right. I think
okay,
there were changes made, but the net sum didn't change at the bottom, or it was something like that, to where. It all, you know, I'm looking at the bottom line, if the bottom line stays. At a zero or higher of money left over, then I'm thinking we're in a good spot.
Okay,
Procedurally, you may not actually have to vote, but this does seem like a good
sure,
opportunity that. What we know is everyone's more aware when there's a vote happening.
Yeah.
I don't mean just the board, but also the community.
community, yeah,
I think
that's.
I think it's also good to bring it into a full discussion item and action item. Just so that we can. Again, make the public aware of. We've got this money set aside here for all this other stuff, but in the meantime, we are still gonna have these emergencies. Here is a great reminder of what we need, you know, why we need to be cognizant of that and why we need to. Be flexible on some of our other planning.
Thank you.
you may ask to clarify one more thing, when you, with your logic, you're presenting Whitman and Longfellow, the doors identified on there, Tim, if you can scroll back up to Whitman and Longfellow. We just had some money identified for entries that we are having a hard time keeping operational. So, and then parking lot is in serious disrepair. It's actually a trip hazard. Do I stick with those?
I mean, I say, cause those are safety concerns.
I would.
So to me, yeah, keep those,
Okay.
my perspective.
Have they been bid out yet, or is this again a scenario where it's a pretty good estimate?
I'm confident. Right. And then for east cooling tower repairs, that's a number I'm not confident in, but that's something I would not defer. That has to happen. We talked about that before. So then what I will do is I'll cross off roof repairs. According to 5-year plan of 400,000, I'll cross off unit substation electrical feeder and standby power generator, which would then supplement, put it back in that balance, 1.4 million.
Mhm.
That would be held for contingency.
Yeah, and then I would say it would make sense to put a line item in there to then reserve that money.
So what I have on there right now is I have an asterisk, if you go down to the bottom page, thank you. It just says hold for all the way down. One more page. Right there.
Yeah.
I'm indicating hold, you see right there, is that adequate?
I think so, I don't wanna see so roof is, like, you're not gonna be completely removed from this
I'm
document?
gonna leave them on the document, cross them off,
Okay,
and put a 0 in the budget number.
great, I wanted to make sure that it was.
I don't want, yeah, they should be still identified as they're being put on hold for the budget reasons.
Right, I don't want someone to inadvertently see all of a sudden there's $1 million extra here. And thinking,
Where to come.
where did it come from and or where is it, what's going on, so either that or. Little note as to why. Sure.
This conversation that we just had didn't happen in the past. And so these types of things were either with a more direction. You know, to prioritize funds. I just want to thank you for your guidance and leadership in providing staff with some type of direction in terms of what the next step should be. I think often in our community, there's talk of governance, and what we just witnessed was it at its height. So I can speak for our staff in saying that we have these conversations in offices and we're not quite sure what direction to go. You provided a great deal of detail and direction for us, and for that, I say thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to 3C, Director of Finance report.
There should be an attachment. Okay. So over the past few months, we've been going through the objects.
All right. Thank you, Tim, for fixing the technical difficulties with the screen. So we will continue on to 3D, May financials.
So I was reflecting back on, I think my first finance committee meeting was this meeting last year. And, how far we've come in terms of the reporting and what we talk about. And I'm pleased to share with where we're tracking to end the year. So you just heard from Jess about the specific areas that we still have concern, but overall, our budget is tracking very close to what we budgeted. So, that will be the headline here. Tim, if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we have 1 month left, now really just 2 weeks, but this reflects just June being left. And we're getting to the point where we have pretty statistical certainty at this point. Go ahead, Tim. So that's not to say, though, that we know exactly to the dollar where we're going to end. This is our high level overview, of course. So again, beginning on the left-hand side, that column is our prior year. And right-hand column is our current year. This is our current year to date versus budget, right? So the predictive isn't in here. What we'd expect on this chart is that we would not have spent our entire budget if there's a month left to go. Salaries and benefits are, the most predictive because that's a real consistent schedule. Our purchase services are the areas that, Jess has been talking about and I've been talking about pretty much at length, and we can see that that's still, we know we're going to overspend, or we know we're going to, we won't be surprised by that budget. Again, the overall is going to end up just fine, which you'll see on the next slide. Perfect. So as of today, I'm predicting or estimating that we're gonna end up $54,000 and $54,055 to the good of budget, okay? Now. I'll also say this, I'm not a gambler, so, but I do understand odds. And if you were to take that number versus the field, I would recommend you take the field, because the chance of us ending exactly at that dollar amount is like almost nothing, right? But, that, and that's the hard part for anyone in my position or Jess's position and coming to the board or the community and saying, here's the exact number, is that the chance of that being exactly right is infinitesimal. But we're tracking where we're going to be just slightly better than budget. So, and when you go through our budget line by line, which is what Jess and I have done and continue to do, you're going to see spots like our purchase services, which likely will end up over. We've been talking about that for months. We're also seeing though, right, some of our state and federal money from a revenue side being over. So when Jess talked about, for instance, overspending on the library account, that's due to a common school fund grant. So if we overspent the money, but we had also under budgeted, so the two end up netting each other out. So, go ahead.
No, next slide.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, can you go back? I'm gonna steal my own thunder from the board meeting a little bit. I want to put that $54,000 into some context of how, why it's hard to say, here's what an exact dollar amount is. And you know, I like to use, kind of examples that these resonate with me like at home. So, my daughter's going on vacation with her mom this summer. She wants some money from me for like food and souvenirs and stuff. So I'm gonna give her $100.
My God.
And, so what I'm trying to get to is what $100,000 is in our budget versus $100. So it's possible we could end up $100,000 plus or minus this 50,000, which seems like a lot, right? But in the example of my daughter taking $100, that's the equivalent of a dime. So if she came back and said, I spent $99.90, right, I'd be thrilled. I'd probably also be fine if she came home and said she spent $100.05. That's how precise this is. But also why it's scary to share with community and board, because if someone gets locked in on an exact amount and our interest comes in a little higher or a little lower, what seems like a big swing is actually a pretty small swing. But I'm pretty confident that we're gonna end up slightly better than budget. Go ahead, Tim.
Which compared to where we were a year ago, coming in slightly better than budget is a huge task and a huge lift. So appreciate you and your department making that happen.
Yeah, I think thank you. It's really a team effort, right? Because you know, Jess had talked about identifying early on where we were with subs. Yes, we're going to overspend legal, but we've been talking there hasn't been a committee meeting or board meeting where that hasn't been mentioned.
Well,
So,
if I may interject, as early as August, we made some really difficult personnel decisions. As just indicated, Ms. Elizowski and HR made some really difficult and in some corners of our community, unpopular decisions around perks that were provided to substitute teachers. All of these different things, everyone
Has an impact.
everyone had a role in this to get us to this place, but I would echo what you're saying, time around. I think that Mr. Ecker, Jess, and the rest of the team deserve a great deal of credit for getting us to this place.
so I'm kind of to what I was saying before. The main goal with the monthly updates has been that the board and committee not be surprised, right? And so, like I said, I'm pretty certain we won't end up at exactly $54,055. But But last year, it was a surprise to the board and community when we ended up millions of dollars off target. So again, what I'm just showing here is what this software, had it been used at this time last year, would have predicted where we are now. What I know is we're not gonna end up with a surprise like there was last year. Go ahead, Tim. Oh, and here is where I gave that example. Thank you.
Nice work.
And I do like.
Yep, that's it.
I don't have any questions. This looks good. We revised the budget a few months ago and I would expect us to come in pretty, if your revisions were accurate,
Correct.
we should come in pretty spot on. It looks like we're trending that way. I don't have any further questions on it. What do you? Okay. Anything else? All right, well then let's move on to 3E. Financial analytics.
So Tim, that's called either financial analytics or budget analytics. Like top one. So what I've been trying to do for the committee is each month or every other month, just kind of peppering a little bit of data in for information purposes. If Jason, you had mentioned at one point having the board look at that, either go back to a committee meeting, look at it, or if the committee wants to at some point get some of these on an agenda, I'd be happy to share any parts of this as well. But in the meantime, I'll just kind of I haven't heard anything different, so I'll try and bring something every month or every month as a kind of just a data point, a learning point.
Which one was it?
That's it, yep. So what I've been looking at recently, as we built the 26-27 budget was historically, where had we been? To just get a better handle on my understanding of the district. And so really what we're looking at this month is some of that history. So you might already know all this stuff. It was a lot of learning for me, so I thought I'll share it. Go ahead, Tim. Just to kind of frame this out. So this is sort of my learning. Really this year, I thought was a lot about both our departments, myself, a lot of people just building awareness. We increased transparency, hopefully we've increased trust in the community. The 25-26 budget priorities really primarily remain true to the referendum, right? Close those gaps that we identified. 24-25 was a lot about finding where were things not budgeted correctly and closing those gaps, and then putting money back into the fund balance. I think 26-27 and beyond, we really need to start focusing on how are we measuring the return on investment. Now, whether that is by, it might be, it should be things around either systems and structures, student achievement. The facilities is probably the easiest thing to measure because we either fixed something or we didn't. But with the investments we've made and the awareness we have now, I think that's the big next step for us. And I'll talk about that kind of towards the end here. Go ahead, Tim. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the thing I've been looking at is where have we made the most significant investments in spending since in the last 5 years? So since 1920. And what we see here, the bar graph, or the bar, is the increased dollars in that particular area since 1920. And the line is what percent that budget went up. So if we're looking at the very first one, that's district-wide curriculum and instruction. That budget is increased by about 4.25 million since 1920, which is the equivalent of 120% of the budget. So the budget more than double. And likewise, you can see for the all of the areas on the bottom. So these are kind of the 10 biggest areas of investment. Go ahead and click the click your mouse. It's going to have perfect. So for perspective, I wanted to add an inflation line here because like for elementary education, that's primarily salaries or salaries and benefits, so staffing. For perspective, I want to know how that compare, like, is that a lot or not, right? So that's barely, it's not even keeping up with inflation, for instance. Now, some of those other areas, elementary, that particular code doesn't include like art or things that can be drilled down, so. Really what I wanted to see is what are this helped me pin down where have we really made the most investments relative to other places. Does this chart make sense?
I think so, it is a little confusing, but hearing you talk through it makes sense now. You're really, it's a rudimentary way of showing better, what buckets we're putting our money into and how big are those buckets in comparison to previous years?
Pretty much, yeah, um. Said another way, well, look at retiree health insurance, for instance. If someone said, are we supporting our retirees? I have now data to quantify, hey, that dollar amount has essentially doubled in 5 years. If someone said, are we putting money into curriculum? At this point, I don't know if it's enough, like that's gonna be the next slide, but we can show we have definitely put money into curriculum.
So does that mean? So for curriculum instruction is about 4.2 million. That means we spent. In last year's budget, 4.2 million more in curriculum and instruction since 2019-2020, or from 2020 to last year's budget, we spent 4.25 million.
So the budget currently is about 8.5. In 1920, it was about 4.2.
What's the difference?
So this is how much more we've invested in each of these areas.
Just in those 2 years though, right?
No, from 1920
Okay,
to 24-25.
okay.
So that it includes all years in
In
between.
between.
It's not cumulative though. So it's not we added $1 million this year, $1 million this year. It is.
So this is if we were just simply taking 2019-2020 budget and comparing it to current.
You got it. Exactly.
Okay,
So these are not the dollars we actually spent, these are the dollars we did spend and the dollars we in either just spent or anticipate spending.
Correct.
Okay,
Another way to say it. Curriculum instruction spending power is 120% more now than it was in 1920.
so somebody who's looking at this from a different perspective and saying we're spending too much money. This could be a spot where they say, okay, why are you spending 205% more in pupil services than you were in 2019-2020? That's where the story of the district kind of has to come in and say, well, that includes these people who have this impact on our students.
So you teed this up perfectly.
Oh,
Because I'm definitely going to explain the next slide. But what I wondered next was, okay, now I know where we are. Is that appropriate? Right? And at least appropriate compared to our peer districts. I want to know, maybe we were so underspending on curriculum instruction that we needed that infusion just to get to the norm, right? So that's the triangulation piece, I think. So Tim, could you go to the next slide, please? So what we're looking at here, the categories on the left-hand side are the same, okay? The orange dots are our district, and the kind of faded dots are our peer districts in terms of demographics. So not our local peers, but the districts that look most like us in terms of size, ELL population, special ed population, pre-reduced lunch.
thank you.
The line in the very middle that says 0 next to it, that's the average spending per student. So for instance, in special ed, we're very close to the average spending per student. Just ever so slightly above. The main gray area, think of that as like the main highway. That's within one standard deviation above or below the norm or the average. So we can see in terms of elementary education, we're spending under, more than one standard deviation under the norm there. So that might be something we want to investigate more. Maintenance operations, that's the fourth one down. You can see we're spending nearly one standard deviation above. That kind of makes sense to me, given the age of our buildings. You know, the newer they are, the less maintenance you're going to have. To your point, Liz, on both, and we're actually gonna hit the people services on the next slide, but if we look at direct district-wide curriculum and instruction, there you can see we're spending 2 standard deviations above them. That's purposeful, that's where the board wanted the money to go. But to me, that's an area that it is time for us to start looking at what results are we getting from that, right? And so that's kind of where I get to with the last. So here we can see like pupil transportation. I would expect we'd way underspend because we only provide transportation for special education students. But some of these lead me to want to investigate more. Are in particular like tuition is significantly more than other districts. I'm not sure why that is. And when I talked about what I was working on each year, this year was about getting the budget right, and or 24-25 was about discovery. 25-26 is about closing the gap. To me, 26-27 is digging into these things and finding out, is that appropriate for our district?
What is special ed, tuition special ed?
So that's gonna be for students that we can't service in our district. Or at least we've decided we can't service. So it could be a super high need student or something that needs care we don't provide. Go ahead, Tim. This is the exact same chart. I couldn't provide one specifically for pupil services because it's divided into different categories of pupil services. So here I had, some different ahas than the first one. And so these are things I'll want to talk to probably Luke about a little more, like presumably we made a conscious decision to put more money into counseling than we did social work. I would assume, I'm not sure why, and maybe that's what we want to do. But we are an outlier kind of in both ways, high in counseling, lower in social work.
Was this all done? I know there was a lot of code cleanup over the last year. Is this post code cleanup, or there may be some artifacts still in there where some of those like 20 something could be under the wrong code? Would that potentially skew some of these things?
It could a little bit, but it's mostly post cleanup, and it's what has to get reported to DPI. So none of this is data that I pulled from other districts or ourselves. It's all DPI data. So it's what if a member of the public had Tableau and downloaded data, this is what they'd see.
And Scott, this is primarily salary and benefit, as that's.
For these specifically would, because there isn't like a lot of, there isn't like materials that constantly are buying.
There might be a little bit.
But probably 80% is salaries and benefits. And since we know that we pay about average, and maybe slightly below, that probably means we have more counselors. Now, again, we have more buildings than many of our peers do. So if we've committed to having a counselor at every building, that kind of makes sense too. Go ahead, Tim. So this is what I was talking about as far as like, to me, the next big step for really, it's going to be working on it this year for something to be proposed in 26-27 is looking at these investments and then tying them to some kind of outcome matrix. Now, Jenny Foch is working on our next strategic plan, which is going to have a scorecard. And so my vision is that we'll be able to somehow show the results on our scorecard relative to investments. That's kind of the holy grail though. There's lots and lots of smarter people than me with doctorates working on research papers about how to do that. But there is no one methodology that anyone has agreed upon yet, so. That process is going to be working with cabinet to identify something we think works for us, bringing it to the board, but somehow tying outcomes to our.
Well, and we currently have nothing, so
Correct.
something is greater than nothing, even if. It needs to be tweaked, and if we're using something, we're establishing a baseline and we're at least going to get. You're gonna see this, while the scores may not mean anything numerically, you're gonna be able to see. I think your goal is to be able to see whether or not the metrics you're using are improving as we continue along.
Correct.
Money spent equates to
Some kind of,
overall improvement.
if, or. If it doesn't, what we do about that? If we get to that point, we'll really be an exemplar among school districts. I don't
There's no
know
school
of
district,
anyone that does.
there's no school district using ROI for a strategic plan. That's not.
Many moving pieces.
Well, and educators typically don't think this way, so the fact that we've been able to refine our current strategic plan to a place where we can now hone in on what is the return on investment is significant. So I think I shared with the board that we've gone from, with the 22-23 and the 23-24 school year, 71 administrative hearings down to 39. You can extrapolate out and show that the investment in counselors, mental health specialists, deans of students is helping bring that down along with other systems. But 3 years ago, Sarah can attest to this, we weren't even in that position from a systems perspective to even identify, so where are the hot spots? Where do you place interventions? So we've progressed from doing a needs assessment and putting in interventions to now, let's measure if the interventions are having an impact. That's what Scott is describing.
So this is a stretch goal because no one is doing it. But like Iman was saying, we have the pieces in place to get very close to at least tying the measures out somehow.
And I think, like, I'm looking at slide number 3. Which again, I think is probably might be the most confusing slide out of it, but it does make sense.
Can you go back? Yeah, can you go back?
You gonna tell me which one?
I will, I'm guessing this one.
So. What I don't know whether or not it's maybe you've represented it, maybe not. But this is. Now, that's 5 years in the past, right? Or 5 or 6 years in the past is what we're comparing apples to apples to.
Correct.
And if you're looking at your percentage of, okay, well, in special education. We're spending 55% more than numerically, right, in this. And if you were to make the same investment with your money in stocks, bonds, whatever, you apply the rule, like the rule of 7, right? 7% over 7 years would effectively double your numerical value. So if you continue this on and do it towards, when we get to the 2026, 2027, I guess I would expect to see, like, if everything were ideal, we're spending 100% more than in 2019, 2020. Now we know that wouldn't.
Oh, I see where you're going. Okay.
So like just trying to normalize it out. So when someone sees that we've, spent 105% over the retiree health insurance, well, yes, that is high. It's higher than we'd like, maybe. I don't know the details of it, but if we're thinking about it purely from an investment type of mindset, then yeah, it probably is a little bit high, or some of these others would be a little bit low from where we're at right now. But also 2019, 2020 with COVID and budgets getting all kind of messed up. I don't know that the apples to apples is necessarily quite there on this, and then the format you have here is good. I think we might just take some more physical time to get it out there. But I mean, I like it. It's a good litmus test of like where we'd be at year over year.
I guess I have a question. So the red inflation line,
Mhm.
would there be people who would argue that we should never spend over that line? And just noting that like we don't even get state funding that matches with inflation, just to put that out there again. So when I look at these, if I'm somebody, is it realistic to expect any school district to only increase with inflation? Because to me, like looking at this, like how would we have possibly?
Right.
But we know we had some referendum dollars, we know we had ESSER funding and all of that in this.
So,
difference, But.
correct, yeah, had we had no new money
Mhm.
ever. The kind of, and we just said, we just cast every budget forward. All the blue lines would just be at the red line.
Okay.
Right, and we would just say, we're raising everything by 3% a year.
Right.
Right, so this is indicative of. Honestly, it's the board's fund balance investment,
Mhm.
sort of pre-referendum,
Okay.
right? Had we waited to make the investment, we probably wouldn't see this until after the referendum passed and we started spending the money.
So this is more a graph showing fund balance, spending more than
Well-
ESSER or referendum spending. I mean, the 2018 referendum, not the 20.
No, this is purely, where have we put our money? Where,
That inflation line, is that, would that actually be a line straight across, or wouldn't that be?
it's accumulated, it's cumulative inflation, CPIU.
I guess, is it realistic for any school district to just spend on that red line?
No.
I guess,
No,
is my question. Sorry, this.
you're asking a fantastic question, and I think that's where the angst that we hear in the community of people saying, well, you're spending all of this money. When, again, I'll go back to the strategic plan piece. When we arrived and we did the needs assessment, if Mr. Pinion was here, he would tell you there wasn't anything here. In the area of people and family supports, or if Dr. Marble was here, and I think that may be actually healthy for this committee over the course of next year to have them come and explain. So it's not enough just to have an ROI. I think it's important for them to say, so here's where we're spending the money. And then you can ask the question, so what is the ROI? But no, what we found was that there wasn't any investment. That's why, if you remember, the board would say, we believe that this investment that we're making by utilizing fund balance was the right thing to do, because when you couple the fact that there wasn't anything here to begin with, plus the state legislature has not invested in schools, we had to do something because the structure of what people were depending the school system to do just wasn't capable to do it. So I like to always mention the Whitman structure. When I arrived, Whitman was not in a good place. What we did when we looked at it, we did a needs assessment and realized they didn't need one, they needed 2 deans of students. They needed a mental health specialist. When all of that was done, we saw changes. So Liz, you're absolutely correct. A strict conservative that believes in financial austerity would say, it doesn't matter. You should just spend where that red line is. If you are running a school system where you're expecting to get results and serve children at their level of need, then you have a moral obligation. And I think our community has given us the benefit of the doubt to say, yes, make the investment. But I think they're quickly also saying, and this is where Scott is trying to lead us, but we would like to see where is the return on the investment. we are aligned with the moral imperative, but we also want to see that the money's being put to good use. And so that is, so we didn't plan this, but that is the real, goal of the August 4th board workshop, where we talk about the strategic plan, because the board will be asked in August to approve the new strategic plan. You had an update on it in May. We're continuing to give you updates, but that strategic plan, I think it should drive everything. The last thing I would say is that while that red line is there are other aspects of the organization that would say, and you haven't spent on us yet. So for example, our technology team would say, we don't have enough equipment to do the type of things that we want to do from a technology standpoint. We don't have enough technicians to support the work that we want to do. And Scott and Jess and I hear many aspects and many centers of our organization that would say, we want investments too. That's the real challenge of trying to prioritize, but also be financially responsible.
I think this chart too would, this would change vastly depending on what you're comparing to, right? So since 2019, 2020, we haven't been spending the appropriate amounts in where it needed to be. So if we said today, yes, we believe everything is at its correct level of spending, and then you did this over next year, and compared to next year's budget, you would probably see these bars be far closer to the inflationary line, right? So I think this is, it's a good tool. It is highly subjective, and so I think someone needs to have the broader picture of understanding of what it is we're looking at here, and what are we calling an investment. And I think you guys have explained it enough to me. I understand what's going on here.
Well, I can tell you one thing that's not on here. You don't see Fisher administrators as one of the largest investments in the last 5 years. And part of this is just quantifying for the public, where have we put our money, right? I think that's it for that.
No further questions. We are getting close to the end, so we'll try to keep on pace here. 3F, Recreation Department report.
So you just have a report in front of you. I think you know this, but if you don't, Matthew Vanderkamp actually has taken a position at the Mequon Kingsville School District. So we steal people from them, they steal people from us. Now it's our turn to steal back. So he is starting there July 1. We have 2 really qualified people in-house that are acting as interim directors right now, so really thankful to them for doing that. Sarah is going to be bringing an updated job description to the board for approval, and once that is approved, then we're going to be posting for the position. In the meantime, though, registrations are exactly where we want them. Steve and Kristen are the 2 people in the co-directors right now. They gave me an update on Monday. That was the first day of camp. They are like ready to go. The doors are open. Everything is happening as it should be. One thing Matthew had told me is that he knew his team could do it in his absence. Not that we want a director absent forever, but they are doing an awesome job.
Okay. Anything from the document that?
That was just showing how registrations are compared to prior years, and essentially they're the same.
Okay, and that document's available on board docs for anyone else who wants to look at it in detail. Any further questions? All right, then we will move on to 3G, proposed ad hoc committee architect agreement.
So this is something that we want to bring up for committee now. discussion at the first July meeting and action at the second July meeting, so that's the sequence. The architect that we've used on multiple projects, has been PRA. They are in fact the ones who did they're working on the current referendum. They did the original facility assessment, which also included the secondary schools. And I guess maybe different than we did with the prior committees, we'd like to have a formal agreement with an architectural firm prior to the board making any kind of decision about a referendum, so that this committee is on board with the ad hoc committee, so they can provide information as needed. And that's kind of the norm for school districts, is you would have a formal agreement prior to that. What PRA came to us, and so we went up to bid with that. And PRA and Zimmerman were the two finalists, and PRA said, you know what? I'm gonna paraphrase for them, so this is probably different than they would say it. They said, we think we can do a lot of the work you want, but we might want some help from another firm as well. This is a really big project. They said, we've done all of the background work. We are steps ahead of any new firm in terms of having to come in and reassess. But should you advance in the process or with the ad hoc committee, we also think it would be good to have a second architect. So PRA and Zimmerman have gotten together. This is a draft proposal from them to us. We won't be paying double. What we said is, hey, that sounds good, but what you both spec'd out in your total cost, if we don't want to pay more than that. So essentially, they're proposing splitting the fee. I don't know if it's exactly 50-50 or 60, but that's their business. But we would not be paying any more. PRA would really be assisting on the front end with the ad hoc committee, since they've done all that assessment work. And Zimmerman would be doing much more of the, I'll call it the nuts and bolts, as far as getting in there, getting to the buildings, doing the drawings, that kind of stuff. So this is somewhat unique in terms of the two working together, but I think we kind of get the best of both worlds for no additional cost. And just bringing it up here as initial discussion.
I guess it's not really a concern, just the question is, the fee structure on post-referendum, percentage of construction fees. That's still up to them to figure out between the two of them, what happens if they don't want to play nice.
So technically, one of them has to become the architect of record. That's going to be Zimmerman. So what they're committing to then is we still have one throat to grab. Yeah, I shouldn't say that anymore. Maybe there's a better term, but that would be, from a record standpoint, the precise firm.
Okay, so they would be assuming responsibility of it, and we'd still be able to hold them accountable.
Correct.
Even if PRA opted out of something or there was a situation. So who knows what the future holds, so.
Precisely.
Okay. And the reason PRA want to prop this up, or do we bring up the
So we interviewed both firms. The costs were like really close.
Mhm.
And PRA called Kevin and said, hey, what do you think of us sharing work? And then he explained why he thought where their strengths are versus Zimmerman's strengths, and it made sense to us.
Okay, so the decision was based off of strengths and not necessarily capacity on PRA's side. I just, I want
I would think that, I think the two things are probably linked, right? Where they think they're strongest is also where they have the most capacity, I would imagine.
okay,
And Zimmerman's biggest concern was, how do we get ourselves up to speed? When a committee is already going. And so that's where they see the natural length of PRA. Because PRA has been in the buildings hundreds of times.
sure. I'm all for, collaboration, the competition. I just want to make sure that we're not overlooking something that might be law with unintended consequences down the road. So, how you've explained it makes sense to me.
I think what I'll do is maybe ask both, the principals of both firms to come to the discussion at the board meeting, and they'll be able to speak more candidly, more comfortably than I. Yeah, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but they'll be able to do that.
Okay. Any other questions? No, okay.
No.
Moving on to item H, update regarding WIA negotiations.
Yes, we met, early in June, I think it was the first week of June or really the second week. And the, WPA, has indicated that there's no attachment. They indicated that they would like to wait until we know what our health insurance increase is before we, finish our negotiations with them. So that'll put us, at least in August. So probably not until September, we would sit down again.
And there is, in your opinion, enough physical time to let that all play out and make sure contracts are signed and everything.
Yeah, so contracts were actually due, on Monday by statute. We did field a number of questions from teachers with the concern, so the you issue, what happens when you're not settled? With the union is that you issue a contract saying that the teacher's salary will not be less than the salary for the current year. We answered a number of questions related to staff members being concerned that A, there wasn't a dollar amount listed, and B, that we have not already provided the increase, and so
So they've gotten a letter of intent from us essentially, so that the teachers would be able to go, if they, like, for instance, so they needed to get a line of credit or something. They're able to show the contract and the letter of intent saying it's at least gonna be this
Yeah.
and possibly higher. We don't know.
and so again, we as well as the union have been upfront about what, that we have budgeted for increases. And we expect there to be increases in insurance until we know what that is. We're going to wait. We are taking steps to also go ahead and change our health insurance plan year for July 1 to June 30th. So aligned to the fiscal year, so that in the future, when we do issue contracts, we'll know what health insurance is and have a greater likelihood of being able to provide, what that total compensation looks like for teachers going forward.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Liz, you have any other questions?
Yes. The alignment will hopefully happen in 2026
Yes.
with the
Yes.
fiscal year and the health insurance
So
enrollment.
the tentative plan for right now, which we'll have to have all hammered out by August. Is that we would have a short plan year, from October 1, 2025 to June 30th, 2026. And then start the July 1 plan year, for 2026 to have the full year, July through June. So, there are some things to work out, but a short plan year is much easier than a longer plan year. In that respect, so the things we need to work out are, if we do some type of a last quarter carryover for deductible, or, how we arrange. What those expenses are, because employees will have to start over with their deductible on July.
It'll be transparent and very visible in the whatever budgets so that.
Yeah.
It's not misinterpreted by the way.
100%.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Do you think that not having the salary amount on their contract is gonna affect, employees coming back?
That is something that we, again, brought up with the.
Retention, that's, sorry.
Yeah. If I knew what you're talking about.
Thank you.
So contracts were due, we have, I think we have all but two right now. One employee thought that they had signed their current year contract, but they actually signed a prior year contract. And one person is out of the country right now, and we suspect the same thing might have happened, so we're following up. So yes, I did field a lot of questions about, questions about why, why the salary's not listed, why, et cetera. I don't have reason to believe that it contributed to more turnover. We have a lot of things going on. Yeah, I don't think it resulted in specific turnover. We did appreciate that the union did issue a message to all staff that was, kind of co-authored by us that said, an increase is coming and here's why it's not. Okay, we don't know what it is yet.
I think that's the key and probably speculatively maybe what was missing from last year and why why everyone was very upset because they didn't really know. Well, we still don't really know. We have an idea and we're giving them something. I think is better than nothing.
Yeah. We did host, the last week of school, we did host an information session to update staff members about what we expected, with our health insurance plan. There were about 20 people on that phone call or on the Zoom, and then we sent out the recording after. So there's no way to track and see how many staff members, watched it, got the information. But I have exhausted our resources in terms of getting up to date and information as well as answering questions about what's happening with our health plan. So.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions, then we move on to item 4, adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second. Liz,
Yes.
Jason, yes. We are adjourned, the time is 12:08 PM.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know there was a meeting, so appreciate your